Hello, it's me, God's comic Brad Stine. This is Brad Stine Has Issues where comedy, Christianity, and conservatism collide in a cacophony of clarity. I know what you're thinking. Are women smart enough to vote? Is that compelling enough? Clickbaity enough? Well, guess what? Heather McDonald will be with us tonight to speak about it. She was just with John Stossel on his television show like a week or two ago, and she wrote The Diversity Delusion, about how it's a delusion to think that diversity is an upside and helps a cohesive country survive, but in fact crushes it. And she's talking about women and the feminization of a culture and how it destroys things. And as a woman, to come up with this conclusion based on data, not on her subjective feelings, this is quite a fascinating approach to where we're at in America. Folks, it's hard, it's rough, it's difficult because we live in a country now where the people that are in the country, citizens and Americans, hate each other. If you're a Democrat, you're hated by the Republican. If you're a Republican, you're hated by the Democrat. If you voted for Trump, you're hated by people that voted for Kamala. If you voted for Kamala, you're hated by people that didn't. So, it's just not really going to work, folks. It's not going to sustain itself. It's not going to pull itself out from this despair unless God Almighty is asked to intervene. And that only happens when his people, who are called by his name, will humble themselves and turn from their wicked ways, and he'll hear from heaven and help us. So I always am out there talking about the church, and the church doing its job, which is to stand for the moral truths that the founders believe were necessary for this nation to survive. The Christian truths, not Muslim truths, not polytheistic truths, not atheistic truths, not secular humanist truths, and not the truths of the Enlightenment, but in fact, God's truths, the truths that he set up when Western culture was formed a long time ago. So yeah, we're going to be talking about women. Going to be talking about women in the culture, women when they were given power, women when they are in the feminist movement. Now, are we anti-women on Brad Stine Has Issues? No, we are not. Women are, as you know, because I'm a Christ follower, thus I'm following the truth of reality. It is not religion. It is the only truth that actually exists. God revealed himself in the form of a man, Jesus. So I go to the Bible because it talks about the man that was, in fact, God and man single-handedly. There's never been another one like that because it's the only truth that the world has ever known, that God has revealed himself. Now, this is important because I see the world through Jesus' eyes. That's really the job of the Christ follower. If you're taking it seriously, if you really believe it's true, and if you believe that God is real and how he revealed himself to us, well, he'd do it in a perfect way because he's perfect. So there wouldn't be a whole bunch of religions. There'd be the perfect one. He doesn't need a bunch, doesn't need some second chances, doesn't need a bunch of options to help people figure it out. He said, here's how I'm doing it, the end. Follow me or don't. Run if you must. But nevertheless, we have women who were created alongside men. They were given equal status. They were given equal dignity. They were told that they were, in fact, crucial, and they were the last thing made, I might add, in God's universe, and only then did God say it is very good. This is something I even had in my comedy show. So, yeah, there's nothing anti-woman, but here's the world that we live in now in the United States and in this sort of post-truth world. If you have an issue with particular sex, like the male or the female, if you have an issue with particular behavior, if you have an issue with different cultural norms, if you have a issue with how the Constitution is being presented and how it's being protected by the courts or not, you have people that think that somehow you are bigoted or racist or sexist or whatever. Now, it's not true. It's simply a perspective that has been created so that they can control you, that they can shut you up, because those of us born in the West have these Christian virtues inculcated into our sort of experience as to how we're supposed to engage each other, even though we don't realize it. If you're not a Christian, you think, well, I'm not a Christian. Well, you are. You got everything that you believe about human rights, women's rights, children's rights, all of these justice that God gave us. It's all Christian ideas that became the Western's fabric. And so to us, it's just normal. Just matter of fact, the atheist literally believes they make it up on the fly. They actually think, hey, I just thought this up. You're supposed to treat people like this. I don't need God. And it's like, well, you kind of do, because if you think you're making it up and you decide to be given power, which is what happens to the atheists when they're given power, then their name is Pol Pot and millions of people die. When the atheists are given power, their name is Mao Zedong and millions die. When their name is Stalin, they're given power, then millions and millions die. This is what happens when atheists are given power. They kill because they become the God, and that's what they want. They are worshipers of their own intellect, and that's what makes them systemically narcissistic. The worship of self, that's pure pride. It's original sin. Yes, atheism is a religious cult that serves Satan. They don't know it. They don't even believe in him. Nevertheless, he is their master, and when they die, they'll spend eternity with him. So this is a lot to take in with just the opening segment of Brad's Son Has Issues, but I want you to understand where we're going. This is about women and how women can and cannot interact in the world in a way that is fun and funny and integrative. As a matter of fact, I got a comedy clip that I did about men and women because it's the ultimate bit about men and women, is the ultimate concept in comedy. It's the one that cannot go wrong. Everybody's got one. So I decided, well, why don't I have one too? And some of you might be aware of it. If you're fans of mine, you've seen these clips. For those who are brand new to Brad Son Has Issues, I wanted to show you a clip of some things I did when it came to men and women. Let's take a look.
Difference. Men and women different, gender different, emotionally different. Men and women emotionally different, completely different. The way that we respond to things that we feel in our life, completely different. Why do we pretend like it's not true? Even in the way that you emote verbally. When I came out on stage, did you see the difference? Oh, it was all the same. No, guys yell, girls scream. Girls don't feel embarrassed, they just scream. Guys don't. You know why? Because guys have learned that screaming is something you're supposed to do in case of danger. That's what screaming was designed for, something to save for a special occasion when you're really gonna need it. Women don't care, they just let it go. Guys like to low-key everything. That's why even when we do yell, we do it at a low level because we're thinking we don't want to act like we're afraid. You ever hear a guy go, ah, something bad? Just happened. He was on the Overlook. He's not there now. Guys, low-key it. It's one of the great things we learn from women, how to feel. Guy could see the best friend he's ever had in his life, who he hasn't seen in 5 years, come wandering out of the desert, and we'd be like, what's up? Running late, ain't you? Best friend in tatters out of the desert. We don't care. We don't care. You know why? We've got a new friend by now. And he's got plasma TV. Guys keep it to themselves, not girls. They scream. They let it out. The problem is men do not know how to differentiate between the good scream and the bad scream. Because it sounds the same to us. They just let it rip, and we don't know if I'm about to get beat up by somebody's scream or the, oh look, I found the backing to my earring scream. It sounds the same. We don't know. We can't tell the difference. And you never know when it's coming, too. You never know when it's coming. That's the worst part. Girl sees a friend she hasn't seen in like 2 hours. So there was a mom all by myself, and I thought what we'd do is we'd hit her with this. Thinking I actually carry on a conversation at this doesn't. Shut up! They start hitting decibels we can't even hear anymore. Every dog in town's going, what is that? Somebody found an earring.
So if you are brand new to Brad Stine Has Issues and have never seen my podcast, I am a comic. I'm hoping you jumped on because you either saw some clips of my comedy or you heard about it or maybe you just saw me live. Matter of fact, I just got back from Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Mabee Center at Oral Roberts University where I was performing a big giant fundraiser for like 500 folks for the GOP fundraiser there. And it was fun. It was a blast. And I did my show. But who wasn't there was my son. I asked him to come and he said, I don't feel like it. Tulsa bothers me. He said something about he felt there would be locusts. He felt there might be whirlwinds. He fears the West, and especially Oklahoma because of the tornadoes. He's got a phobia against tornadoes. Matter of fact, if you've never been on Brad Stine Has Issues, you should meet my producer and my sidekick because he's my son, but also he's easy to joke with because a lot of times he gets confused, even with normal nomenclature. So let's go see if I'm accurate when it comes to his Oklahoma fear. Folks, please welcome to Brad Stine Has Issues, my son, Wyatt Leroy Stine. Son, how are you and what took you so long?
That's a good question. I'm doing fine.
Okay.
And what took me so long was struggling to understand what your question was.
Oh, no, I just meant getting on to the podcast because I've been on now for, quite a few minutes, and I wondered where you were. Normally you jump on right away and you start sort of
I never jump on. You introduce me, and then I add my witticisms, and then we go from there.
Oh, so you're saying you were waiting for me to
I've been in the green room for the past 5 minutes waiting for my cue, and it never came.
Okay. Now, does that cucumber something?
Oh, now you'll get the cucumber. Okay, audience, this is a little fun, little behind the scenes at Brad Stine Has Issues. So earlier this morning, I made a funny little pun joke based on cucumbers.
Are you sure? Because you just set it up as funny. So when you reference it to the folks, if it's not funny, you're going to look like egg on your face.
No.
Okay.
It was
You're
fun.
going all in.
I'm going all. I'm betting and raising.
All right.
Yep. The joke basically went something along the lines of, what is a poor player's favorite vegetable? Cucumber. This man stared at me like I was insane. And it took me explaining the joke to him multiple times to get it.
Well,
This is your comedic genius in the front seat.
No, that's not what happened. You were drinking water that had cucumbers in it, and then you said something about a cucumber is you said Q, and then somehow you said, but a Q is the stick you use.
No.
And then you talked about a cucumber. It never made sense.
No.
Folks,
I
I'm sure
gave the joke cucumber, and you had absolutely no idea what the joke was, so I had to explain to you the etymology of Q sticks and Q balls.
Yeah.
That was the entire crux of the joke that you completely missed.
Okay, well, let's get to a joke I didn't mix, and that is the difficulty with the female. Wyatt, I got to ask you a few things about ladies because, you're not an expert on that.
I'm not an expert on many things, no.
No.
Also, this is a very dangerous game to be playing right now.
Oh, my goodness.
I really hope you have an escape plan, like maybe an ejection seat or...
I think historically you would be better off juggling nitroglycerin than bringing up the difficulty with the female.
Yep, this is going to be one of our best shows, isn't it?
Well, here's the thing, though, son. So we got Heather McDonald on, and she's been on this her second time on the show. She's a wonderful guest. She's an egghead. She's really smart. She's data-driven. She's written beautiful and amazing books. She really goes to the data. She sees the destruction of the West, and she's really concerned about women who find it difficult to escape their emotions and their nurturing capacity, which they're designed by God to do, and how that's been manipulated to cause them to have an over magnified concern for, let's say, an illegal immigrant. Nothing wrong with having a concern for an illegal immigrant, but they take it to a level as though they are their children and they need to protect them. Now, this is the premise. And by the way, I didn't come up with this, nor did Heather. I've actually heard a couple of women, I think a book has even been written, but I heard one lecture about the idea that the maternal instinct is what's being manipulated, because if you've not been married, you've not had children, you don't suddenly stop being a woman. You still have this desire to nurture and to defend and protect the innocent, because that's your job, that's your motherly instincts. And that can be used to suddenly, in a political scheme, to say, look at this poor downtrodden. That's kind of your child over there. That's your little baby over here. This downtrodden, this being oppressed, this poor child that's being bullied. And that's how they see it. And so they use that, and they can't think clearly, because they say, yeah, but these guys, it's illegal, so one must be holding people accountable to being legal and to not break the laws. Two, many of them are criminals and have harmed women, so you'd think you'd want to protect them. So they really lose their ability to be objective, to be data-driven. And here's the thing, men are more data-driven. More men are interested in engineering. More men are interested in mathematics. There have been amazing women engineers. There have been amazing women mathematicians. There have been women that have worked in aerodynamics or things. So we are not saying that women can't do it or can't be great at it. Not saying that at all. But unfortunately, in this day and age, you have to qualify everything you're about to say in case somebody hears that. If you say, mostly men like to be engineers, what they hear you saying is, women are terrible engineers and they don't deserve to be engineers. That's what they hear, because they hear it through the grid of this filter that says, let's find a victim. Just because we haven't hit some kind of diversity ratio that shows, shouldn't there be exactly as many women in engineering as men? And the answer is no, because if they're not interested in it, then why would they be in it anymore? Then women aren't jumping in line to become an oil rig guy out in the Pacific Ocean or the Antarctic. Women aren't jumping on board to get in and do bricklaying. They're not jumping on board to do construction in the middle of the summer, or to put up high-rise buildings, or to be a lineman for the county. And they ride the main line, searching in the sun for another overload. Yes, that's from Wichita linemen, but nevertheless, you don't see women linemen. You don't see them braving the blizzard because the lines went down. Does that mean women are worse than men? No. Does it mean women are weaker than men? Yeah. It means exactly that. Women are not as strong as men and are not as easily able to tolerate and to embrace hardcore, brutal, back-breaking work that men do, mining and for coal and this and that. Yeah. Now, do women have the ability to withstand pain? They sure do. They have babies, and that's very, very painful. But I just read something, Wyatt, that getting kicked in the testicles there's some kind of rate. It's kind of like Scoville units. You know Scoville units?
Yeah, measure of spicy pepper spice.
That's right. Okay. So there's a unit of pain threshold stuff. Anyways, supposedly being kicked in the groin is somehow like having every bone in your body broken simultaneously and having 100 babies. It was so crazy.
Yeah,
it was so crazy.
I know what you're talking about. That is a notoriously fake statistic.
Oh, it is?
There is no unit of measure for pain because it is subjective how everyone experiences it, and there's no real way to calculate what would hurt more than something else.
Well, but wouldn't that also apply to the Scoville units for heat in your tongue?
Oh, no, because Scoville units are an actual unit of measurement. It's the amount of times you have to dilute it in water to neutralize the spice.
Oh.
Yeah, there's an actual method to it. A Scoville unit is an actual thing you can quantify.
So, if somebody kicked you in the crotch...
It would be about 5,000 Scoville units, yes.
Ah. So it'd be like your groin was eating Carolina Reapers.
I mean, listen, that can't feel good.
Listen,
I'm just saying that probably top 10 last things I'd want to happen.
Yeah. Well, but I'm just saying, and that's very. I didn't know about the dilution giving you access.
yeah.
Okay, that's fascinating. And I'm grateful that you know those things. And that's kind of why you're my sidekick, because sometimes my side needs to be kicked to keep moving forward. Because I think I had some amazing, So you're telling me you've heard the kicked in the groin pain threshold statistic?
I think they call them Dell units of pain, I think is what they call, and it's completely made up, fake.
Really?
Yeah, it's totally fake.
Wouldn't it be better if we didn't say that so women felt sorry for us?
What, and propagate the propaganda, the misinformation? Is that what we are standing for while we sit down and absorb this podcast day?
So you're a sexist. Because I noticed that when it comes to propaganda, you labeled it misinformation. Huh.
Okay, define Mr. Information. Go.
Mr. Information is pure information without having to explain it twice.
Pretty sure that's mansplaining, but go on.
Oh, well, do you know why mansplaining exists? It's necessary!
There's a difference between mansplaining, as in being condescending about explaining how things work, and just explaining how things work.
Okay, so let's go. Let's do this. And if you're a woman watching this right now and you're getting really upset, great. Get on the thread and write something mean and nasty, because it's great for the algorithms. So you'll actually help us grow. But here's what I wanted to say. So I've noticed this, and my only reference point is your mom, because I've married to her 33 years. So I have a reference point. Now, here's the thing about your mom that I find fascinating. Before we get into the car and leave, let's say we were going somewhere and we had a bunch of luggage. Let's say we had 2 or 3 luggages. We had a sewing machine. We had a bowling ball. We had a pyramid, miniature pyramid. Let's say we had a lot of these things, okay? And it all had to go in the trunk, all right? She could look at that trunk. There's some kind of oblong trunk, see every kind of odd shape, and she could put it into the trunk like a master Tetris master, where she literally could find how each one of these things would fit and work and perfectly lock into the, and I'm sitting there going, there's no way these will go in there, and she finds a way to find a spot that I could not find. 100%, giving her all the credit in the world. She nailed it. That's what she can do. Then she gets in the car and begins to drive. And suddenly she's driving behind a car going 66 miles an hour. And it's like, well, maybe move over. And she gets into the wrong lane. She doesn't see how to merge. She can't look ahead, see where the traffic's moving, how to perfectly flow. Men do this without even thinking. We can do it. I literally can merge better blindfolded than your mom can do when she's looking.
And you've tested this theory.
It tested 33 years of watching her go, look, don't get on that lane. It's slower than, okay, never mind.
I'm sorry, you've been driving blindfolded for 33 years?
Well, I've done a lot of merging blindfolded just to prove
so you only put the blindfold on when you're merging?
Just to prove my point.
Obviously, otherwise it would be totally irresponsible.
Well, I have been known to train C&I dogs, and sometimes I'll bring them in and use them as a help to nudge me just to make sure. Because you do need to train them on how to look for the blind.
Well, what kind of dog would make a good seeing eye dog for the blind drivers of the world?
I would say
That'd be a pretty fast one, you know?
I would say a greyhound.
I was thinking golden retriever, but...
Ever heard of a greyhound bus?
Oh, no.
I literally referenced the bus that is used to drive. It's the only, actually, there's no dachshund.
I'm sorry, are there buses that don't drive? That I need to know about?
No, but I'm saying the driving buses that actually have used a particular dog for their logo, and it was a greyhound, and so I'm like, look at that. I put the pieces together for you, and you didn't. It's kind of like the cucumber joke. You just simply missed the whole thing, and if I have to explain it to you, nobody believes me. They just say, yeah, I don't know if there was a joke.
Well, the difference is when you explained the joke about greyhound, I immediately got it. When I explained the joke about cucumbers, it took me another 5 minutes to explain it to you.
Well, it's because I really, honestly don't think were nearly as humorous as you thought you were, or
Well,
articulate.
hey, all of the 9-year-olds on that birthday party thought I was hilarious.
Oh, you killed the 9-year-old. That's true.
Yeah.
I will admit to all the audience.
Big hit in the elementary school.
I'm telling you,
crowd.
clowns are jealous of you, and I'm talking about the big shoe clowns. They're still jealous of you as well. Because
Yeah, I mean, nobody's a bigger joker than me.
no, you are able to relate to 9-year-olds really almost like that's your people.
Mentally, but we're not entirely sure about that.
Well, so here's the thing about women, son. So if you're not a dating man, you're not a big lot of experience with women, but have you ever had a woman friend?
By dictionary definition, yes.
Hence why the man doesn't date. By dictionary definition. What does that mean?
Okay, so the dictionary is this really big book of a lot of words and their definitions.
Okay.
So, if I use the dictionary definition of a word, that means I am using it in the context it was originally designed for. Okay, I can tell by your facial expressions that you're getting really bored right now.
No, I'm not. I just want you
And
to explain to me
honestly,
what dictionary definition of friendship are you referencing so we can keep moving forward in this conversation.
It's friendship, parentheses, with a girl.
So
It's,
you've
it's
had
a new one. It's a new one they added.
Okay. So you've had friend girls?
I would say so, yes.
Okay. And have you ever noticed it's different than your friendship with guys?
No, I barely paid attention to it.
Who's your friend girl?
I've forgotten their name. They were from middle school and high school.
And you forgot their name.
That was in high school.
So
It
you
was
no
like-
longer have, as we speak, you don't have a girl that is a friend of yours.
No, those two concepts do not intertwine within my social presence.
So I'm going to then say that for me to look for your insights or your perspectives on male-female interactions probably is going to be a vacuous.
No. You see, I'm basically the equivalent of the before picture and the before and after.
Okay.
I'm the guy I'm the old reference.
Ah, okay. Well, here's the deal. Men and women are clearly different. Now, we have and no one would have ever argued with that except for the last 10 years when suddenly men who said they were women could play in the women's sports. And that was really problematic because men have been dressing like women for millennia. I don't know if you know that. Matter of fact, I don't know if you knew this. I think it was in Roman times, maybe Greek theater. They didn't let women on the stage, so the men had to dress like women. And I think it might have been Romans too. And I think there is even in Japanese kabuki theater, there would be men dressed like women. So what you would call a cross-dressing, right? So that's existed for a long time. But nobody thought they were a woman. They just dressed and portrayed one. And it was always considered humorous, right? Whenever part of a joke in the sitcoms was the guy's trying to get something and he needs to get into a place where women are, so he dresses like a woman, and then the big reveal is he's dressed like a woman, and it's hysterical. Some Like It Hot, a very famous movie in the 50s, had Marilyn Monroe in it, and Jack Lemmon, and Jamie somebody, the famous actress's dad was in it. Anyways, but they dressed like a woman and everybody laughed because it was funny because you're not supposed to be dressed like a woman if you're a man. So that was the joke. But nobody said you really were. Okay, now, of course, they say you really are. And then they swim. And we've had Riley Gaines on the show, who was a awarded, college swimmer, female, who then suddenly was beaten by a man because he's stronger and longer and faster. Okay, so that's just the way it is. But my point is, son, the fact that we have to have this conversation that clearly men are stronger and upper body strength and length and their fast twitch muscles and everything, and they had testosterone. Obviously, no one's ever had to think. And the way you know that is because there's never been a time in human history where women got an army together and conquered a land. It's never happened in human history. And if I'm wrong, show me. but we know that no continents have been. I mean, maybe there was some Amazon tribe of girls that took a little village that had 3 crippled men in it. I don't know, but certainly no continent, no sea has been traversed by women. It's always men. No one has gone to war and battled and brought back, trophies and so forth. It just doesn't happen, and it doesn't mean because women are inferior any more than children haven't gotten armies together and conquered lands. There's certain roles and places where people belong. In the Christian perspective, it is one of the first belief systems that made it very clear that women and men were equal. The original church, the first church in our New Testaments, had women that the churches would be in their homes. The first churches were in people's homes, and women would lead it. And there seemed to be even some teaching from women. So the church gave women a status that did not exist at that time with the Roman culture. There was nothing like this. So Christianity has always defended, protected, loved, cared for, and gave honor to women. This is a Christian idea. It is not an instinct that humans have. You have to learn this thing and then passed on to you until it becomes your cultural tapestry by which you don't know how else to think. And then you give yourself the illusion you just thought of it. Oh, had I lived back in those days, I would have treated women. It's anachronistic, which is how all the leftists live. They think, well, if I was back in those days, I wouldn't have had slaves. And of course they would have, because they wouldn't have known any different. This would have been common to them. They would have had to be taught different things if their culture was teaching certain things. This is what the Bible gives to people. People that say, well, the Bible was used to promote slavery. No, slavery existed, and the Bible was used to try to find a way to do it without being inhumane. So the Bible literally said in the beginning, do not steal in the 10 Commandments. If you take another man's liberty, you've stolen. It already said don't do that. The Bible said that God said, I got the Israelites and I took you out of Egypt, out of slavery. To say slavery is bad. You don't get to, because everybody did and continued to do it all past the times that the Christians were saying slavery shouldn't be. So it's been used, and it was used by William Wilberforce to stop slavery in England, and then the English did it first, and then we stopped. So this Christian idea about how to treat people has always existed and made the West. But yeah, women had a different role for the most part. They did oftentimes tend to the home and cook and clean, but they also would help gather food and do things. And by the way, the man would help in ways that we don't think he does anymore, but he did. He would help, make the food, but he also would help build the homes and do things around the house and help his wife and get the lumber. They worked together, raising the children together, because they were self-sufficient. They built their own hut, they made their own children, they fed their own people, right? And then once men went off to the industrial age and got away from the house, things began to change. Culture began to change. What was considered the family that was expected to not only continue to make more citizens, but to make sure that they were honorable citizens. All Christian ideas that made the West, made America, and made us this wonderful idea. So if we're to have a woman on to talk about how the female is crucial, but has a role that sometimes can be misused to harm a culture, well, we need to talk about that. We need to have the courage to see the world for what it is, see what it was supposed to be, see where it's gone off, so we can conserve what was godly, and that's what conservatism is doing. It's not afraid of change. It's afraid of change that is going to lead to destruction or is going to destroy a foundation that was more important and more secure and had a history of success than just to bypass it, because suddenly we've decided in the last 10 minutes, let's change everything. It's foolish to change if things are working, if they're healthy, if they are sufficient. It's foolish to change and make things worse because suddenly we've decided that somehow everything we've been doing that work is wrong. Now, does that mean that we shouldn't have changed slavery? No, and we did. we did. But again, there was already a precedent long before that about why slavery needs to die. So I'm not saying that we're trying to throw women back into the kitchen or trying to get them barefoot and pregnant like they used to use as a caricature. But what's interesting is conservative Christian women don't have a problem with having children and taking care of them. They find this an honorable, dignifying, most important thing a human can do. Not only carry one, deliver one, but help nurture it and give it feminine power and traits and love for male and female, as the man and the father gives equal male attributes and instincts and ideas to the son and daughter. So they don't, look, we're not going to be alive long, folks. I don't care if you become the richest CEO in the world. You're going to die, and what happened to your money? So in the long run, this whole idea that I'm fulfilled in my job or my career is really not saying, man, what if I'm fulfilled by how God sees me? What if God tells me who I am? What if God says, will you just do this and raise a great family? And sir, can you bring in this money, but you participate and you love your wife and you help her and you protect her and you defend her and she gives to the husband. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It's a simple thing. But Christianity, of course, demands discipleship, and disciples have to discipline themselves to care more about a beautiful, moral, virtuous life that they make, they live, they help others, and they pass it on to their lineage, than making a lot of money and having a big house. So there's a lot at stake when we begin to break down the difference between men and women, not in a demeaning way, not in a categorical status by which they are diminished, either person. Women have strengths that men don't have, that men need. It's why God said, let's come together and be one flesh. Because you have half of what I need, I have half of what you need, because God said he made them male and female. In God's image, he made them male and female, which means God, his pure essence of both, right? He's both, right? He split us when he revealed to us in the human form, male, female, so that we had to come together to be one flesh, is what he called it, and the same way that we can make a new human. So it's a beautiful, sacred commitment and responsibility that he's given to us. So to rethink and see how to give a power or an authority to women over men can be deleterious and destructive and literally destroy a nation. Sounds crazy. Sounds like you're just trying to not let women succeed. But in fact, no, we're trying to reel back what has become an out of balance, broken system that is looking to female instincts and insights to run a culture. And it will not work. They cannot defend themselves. They will always need a man to come in with a spear and a knife and a gun. And when she wants to have control, she'll need men to fight the men who say, I'm not playing this game. They can't do it without us. We're the ones that have the power, that have always gone to war and died so that they could have the safety. This is not a diminishment of women's roles in military, or that they aren't crucial and equally necessary in the culture. But they are not to lead men, and they are not to be the heads of academic departments and firemen and police officers. They shouldn't be there. It's not their role. They don't have that powerful male instinct that is necessary under those circumstances. And we watched it happen. I heard a fire captain in, I think, Santa Barbara, California, a woman, and they were asking about her being the fire captain. They said, well, what if, listen, you have women, you want them to have the same amount of women as men, and what if there's a 250-pound man in the second story on his house is on fire, and a woman has a 130-pound woman? She's not going to be able to get him out of there. And she said, well, maybe he shouldn't have gotten himself in that position in the first place. Okay, that immediately told me why women don't belong in places where strength and courage and a very likelihood of death is about to occur. So yeah, men and women are different. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's a wonderful thing, and we should dignify and love each other and commit to each other in the best way we can. And as Brad Stine Has Issues show is done, it's to give you the way to see the world through Christ's eyes, because he is the God-man. No religion is true but Christianity. I didn't write it. It's the book that gave the revelation of what God gave to Abraham in the beginning when the Jews gave him Messiah, who was the God-man who died for everybody. And then he said, now I'm going to let the Gentiles jump in so everybody in the world will be equal in my sight because I made everybody in my image. It is a beautiful and special thing. If your Christianity does not stand for that and does not take an unapologetic approach to who Christ said he is and how you need to go to the culture, then you don't believe this. You don't believe it. The other religions should be respected as people, but they're going to hell. And if that's hard for you to understand, or you don't believe that, you are not a Christian, because that's what it demands. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and life. No man comes to the Father but through me. That's a man who was on earth, relinquish his heavenly powers so that he could live a perfect life, pay a price for us that we couldn't pay, so that we could come to him and say, please, can I come into the place of my Father forever? He said, yes, my sacrifice will be sufficient. But then I demand your entire life and desires. Well, that's what's not being taught in churches, and that's what's going to cost us everything. But we are seeing warrior churches. We are seeing churches rise up and seek disciples and people who are fully committed. If you are a church and you want to bring me into your church, just go to bradstine.com and you can do that. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're listening to this on Salem Life Audio. Download it, tell it, and share with others. We're trying to have a fun podcast, but Christian and also great guests. And please go, even if you only listen and you're listening right now in Salem, please do me a favor and help my ministry. Just go to YouTube, Brad Stine Has Issues, and subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. It just helps me grow so that we can continue to make this something that I think God has in store for us. We're trying to add a few more interesting, fun things, bells and whistles along the way. Keep in mind, it's just me and my son. He is learning as he goes, so sometimes it takes a little time to add some of the tweaks, but we're trying, and we're just grateful that God has given us this opportunity to do this thing. It was not something I expected. Remember that I will be this week, Wednesday, I'm going to be in South Carolina, and on Friday, I'm going to be performing in South Carolina. Go to bradstine.com, my tour page, and you can see where I'm going to be. You can come out and see me. You can watch it live. And this is what I do. In the meantime, boy, oh boy, are you going to like this guest. If you remember her, if you're an old fan, and when I mean old, I mean like you've been watching, not that you're like decrepit, but you could be. And if you're a decrepit fan, then you have to listen because you've fallen over, broke a hip, and you can't change the channel. So I'm grateful for that. And I do pray God heals you after the show. Nevertheless, I have a woman who's been on before. She came on again. She was, like I said, you can go look, John Stossel and Heather McDonald. She was just on like a few weeks ago. So major television, and now she's on with us. But she's talking about what's going on with women and what is important to not lose the balance of this culture in regards to male-female interaction and what is necessary for this culture to survive and not be destroyed. I know it sounds like a lot to put on women and maybe unfair, maybe completely backwards, or trying to keep women from growing in their amazing pursuits as to becoming everything they want to be. Maybe that's what you think is happening. Well, then have the courage to sit around and listen to these facts and this data and see if this might help change your mind. Remember, to a Christian, if what I believe conflicts with the truth, I change my belief. To the progressive, if what they believe conflicts with the truth, they change the truth. If you're a Christ follower, you always have to change your beliefs to conform with what is true. So, you are really going to find this intriguing and maybe a little irritating, but most importantly of all, at least, it will be inspiring. Please enjoy this conversation with author and really intelligent lady, Heather McDonald. You know, folks, on Brad Stine Has Issues, every now and again, I get a guest that comes on more than once, and I don't let that happen easily. Usually, I'm very discreet about who I let on twice. But once in a while, I have to say I'm honored that they would have the I don't know, the courage to come on with me again. So this next guest is one of those folks that I love to listen to. I can't tell you how much I love her. And she said, I'm coming back on. So she either lost a bet or she is doing some penance for a life of debauchery. I don't know what it is, but she's here and I love her. And she is so important to the American narrative as to what's going on in this nation that I hope that you are listening and reading her books and watching her. And my show, I hope, helps you get there. And if you're not, God is coming after you. He's not pleased. He's sending boils or locusts. I'm not sure which, but one of them's coming. So please welcome from a Manhattan Institute fellow, not a fellowette, fellow, gender neutral, and City Journal contributor, but more importantly, a truth teller, maybe the least obvious thing on earth to this day. Please welcome Heather McDonald back to Brad Stine Has Issues. How do you do, Mademoiselle McDonald?
Great to be with you again, Brad. And I need to keep at the top of my game. So I figure a repeat occurrence with you is best to keep me on my toes. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, and that's very kind of you, but I can't tell you enough how much I love your work and really do respect it so much. And, one of the things that I find fascinating, I met at a Carol Swain event a couple of years back, and I'm a comic and I'm, as you know, unapologetically Christian conservative comic. So I'm an aberration. I do not fit well, but I don't care. I believe that what I do matters. I believe words matter. I believe discussing reality in funny ways that people might be able to accommodate is crucial for a republic. So it matters to me, words and the control of words and who controls the words. But I got to tell you something. One of the things I hear all the time, Heather, is people come up to me after a show and they're like, man, you are so brave. You're saying the things I've thought of. Thanks for speaking the truth. And it's a kind compliment. And I'm sure you get the same thing in the circles that you, well, unless they're protesting you, but the circles that like you, I'm sure you get the same accolades. But I got to say to you, if a culture has reached a place where just telling the truth is an act of courage, I think we've lost our way. I don't feel like that's a compliment anymore. It's almost like some kind of, I don't know. I don't even know what the words would be, but it seems there's an equilibrium shift when truth seems like an aberration. What do you think that means when they think that being courageous is doing what one would expect a person of virtue to do?
I cannot agree more, Brad. It's pathetic. It really is. But on the other hand, I have to say I'm not in one of those repressive environments that is trying to enforce conformity at all costs. And if I were, and of course I'm thinking is the paradigm case a university, to be a non-leftist in a university today is to be in a very, very embattled minority position. It is hard to stand up against stigma and irrevocable social consensus and exclusion. So I'm sympathetic and I'm admiring of people in those environments who nevertheless do press ahead. I don't consider myself in anywhere near that type of straitened circumstance. I'm pretty much given a platform to speak, and only when I do go into university environments do I have to interact with what is a very, very depressing reality, which is the ignorant student mob braying its self-righteousness. But I would also say that I think it is perhaps rather unique feature of our current reality that we are this completely divided. The polarization is so deep. Now, I'm immediately going to contradict myself and think of all sorts of moments in the past where there may have been just as much of an ideological divide. And of course, the classic example there is the Civil War, where that was so broad that we actually did go to a bloody, bloody war to try and overcome the divisions in fundamental understanding between the North and South. But since then, I think there has been a fairly large area of shared common ground among Americans that in the last 30, 40 years has really dissipated. And as you would have been talking about for years now, Brad, the most extreme example of this is the inability for either side to agree that biological sex is real, that biological sex is not something assigned at birth by an arbitrary decision of a, obstetrician or gynecologist. And so if you can't even agree on fundamental molecular biology about genes and chromosomes, it's difficult to think about what we might in fact agree on.
Well, we're post-truth, so I don't know how you manage that. It's one thing to just sort of have a different philosophical presupposition and try to find some consensus or at least some clarity. I mean, we're not always going to agree with each other, but just like you're a conservative, at least that's how they frame you. Maybe you'd call yourself something else. I'm certainly a conservative. I know you're not a Christian, but you talk like a Christian. Honestly, much of the virtues, much of the moral, ethical Western values are Christian. Greece and Jerusalem got together and said, I think there's a better way to do the world than has ever been done before. And I think they proved it in real time. But, this is the odd thing. And I got to say this to you because, also the life you live is counterintuitive to the very ideas that you are trying to help people see when it comes to this gender defining moment in America as to what we might have in common or don't, because you seem to be able to. I can't even believe that I have to qualify some of the statements that I'm about to say, but and you'll see why I'm seeming a little convoluted right now. I'm going to say a joke. Okay, if I was to say a joke, I'm going to say about maybe we made it an error in confirming the 19th Amendment. That'd be funny because it'd be kind of a joke about women and voting and this and that. Best punchline, I got to say, and I can't believe it, I'm saying it, but I've seen more and more people talking about this and even doing sort of academic research in this idea that maybe there is a problem with women when they're given control and power over the narrative of a culture. Now, white left women are destroying the world. It sounds like I'm making hyperbole so we can laugh together. But that's kind of what even you're evaluating is there's something wrong with not the way they see the world, I guess, because they're humans. But when that becomes powerful, when it's given cachet, it's dangerous. Now, it sounds really sexist, and we're going to just use monikers to diminish what I'm saying. But it's what's happening. This particular group of white, leftist, progressive, middle-aged or older women have lost their stinking minds. It's like they can't see, I don't know, giant setup to maybe a simple response, but is that what's happening? It's that particular group that seems to be really the sticking point as to why we are not being able to get some progress in finding some civility? I don't know. You answer my question because apparently I'm not very good at even framing it.
No, I think you framed it well. I would generalize even more broadly, I guess, and take out for temporarily the white progressive label and just say males versus females, although it could be that white, progressive, and female is almost a tautology. But, the feminist movement has been characterized by internal contradictions from the start. On the one hand, we used to hear about how the world would be so much better if run by females. There'd be no wars and it would be much more compassionate. At the same time, feminists deny that there's any differences between males and females. God forbid, you talk about average predilections. And it turns out that the second proposition is absolutely correct. And of course, I have to do the little disclaimer here. I'm talking about group averages, not about any given individual within a group. But on average, there are very, very large differences between a male outlook on the world, male mental capacities, intellectual capacities, psychological orientations, and female. Men on average have been bred evolutionarily to be risk takers, to be competitive, to be aggressive, seeking out to conquer new fields, whether it's geographic and circumnavigating the globe and moving across continents and mapping them and figuring out the geology, or intellectually, there's also a passion for systematizing, for coming up with rules. And on the sort of intellectual skills front, males on both ends of the math spectrum as are both extremely poor at math at one tail of the curve and are the most brilliant mathematical thinkers at the high end of the distribution of math skills. Females, by contrast, have been bred by evolution as caretakers, to be risk averse, to be not in favor of going out and sacrificing all for the sake of heroism or chivalry or virtue, and they're much more group oriented. Psychology has known this for years. It comes up with the big 5 personality traits. One of them, of the traits for which it ranks different individuals, is neuroticism, which means a high level of fear, concern, again, risk aversion, feeling vulnerable, feeling traumatized. Females rate much, much higher on the neurotic scale in the big 5 than males do. And so, what we have now, the direction of modern society, for a variety of possible reasons, and it becomes at some point a tipping point, is becoming more and more feminized. Females are taking over more and more institutions. Certainly, they run the university, and we have poll after poll that shows, for instance, a huge difference between males and females when it comes to a belief in truth-seeking at whatever cost, academic freedom, following ideas where they take you, versus the sort of nauseating safetyism that was at its zenith during the COVID lockdowns, which I know is something else, Brad, that you have been relentless in criticizing.
Oh, of course.
And so 71% of males in one poll support in academia placing academic freedom and truth-seeking ahead of social cohesion. Females, it's just the opposite. 57% believe it's much more important to maintain social cohesion and support the marginalized, which is a fictional concept, than to follow ideas and truth wherever it leads. And so institution after institution is becoming more feminized. What worries me the most is the judiciary, but we have this in corporate leadership as well. That makes a difference. And the trend for greater and greater government, more welfare spending, the suspicion of private enterprise, this is at least is coterminous with female dominance, if not a direct outgrowth thereof.
Well, but I want to, of course, agree with you when it comes to that logic and reason. I do believe that men are more interested in solving problems than talking about them. I mean, that's just kind of the way women like to talk about what they've been experiencing, and maybe that's helpful to them. And a man's like, well, that's fine, but let's fix it. And they're like, well, wait a minute, all my grievances haven't been uttered yet, and I haven't been, sympathized yet. So, of course, I want to agree with you. But in a course, I believe that men and women intrinsically have different brain wiring, obviously biology, obviously testosterone, estrogen. Obviously, there's some differences in the way we see and with things that we're interested in. I think Jordan Peterson said, men are interested in things, women are interested in people. And by the way, nothing wrong with that. It's a nice balance that we can give to each other. And maybe you can make me feel more empathy towards somebody that as a man, maybe I wouldn't be more naturally inclined to do. And maybe a man can say, get behind me, babe, we're going to get through this thing. And she's like, let's roll. So there's a value to us giving to each other this thing. But the one thing that I was going to say, though, is, but we have to be able, if we are logical, reasonable, practical humans that want to move forward, to be able to circumvent our natural instincts at times to see what is true. And I know we can do that because one thing I've heard, I don't know if it's a book coming out, but I listened to this woman talking about this, and it was an interesting take on this. Maybe you've heard it. You're so smart, I'm sure you have. But is that a lot of what's happening with a woman that ends up in the left category is that women have maternal instincts. They want to take care of children and the weak and those who can't tend to themselves. That's your instinct. And what they're doing is they are manipulating the nurturing instinct of a woman. And if that woman hasn't had children or hasn't gotten married or doesn't live in that kind of a world, she replaces that with the downtrodden, with the oppressed, with the underrepresented, with the marginalized. Oh, this guy came in here with his family illegally. Well, we need to help him. So they've actually manipulated this beautiful, nurturing, intrinsic woman trait to use as a cudgel to demand certain new forms of philosophy in America. Well, men, on the other hand, maybe in learning to try to be accommodating to women and not to beat on women, because we're taught to be kind to them, even if we think they're crazy, might sometimes give them their wishes. And then we're destroying culture because we're not saying, you know what, nah, you guys draw the line for them. So have you heard anything about this idea of replacing the maternal instinct to become a political driving force towards a leftist agenda? Does that make sense to you?
Yes and no, and I would say the most appalling example of that is what I see in around where I live in New York City, which is middle-aged or older women wheeling along dogs in baby carriages.
Okay.
There's the dog desperate to get out and exercise his legs, and yet the maternal instinct is so great that this presumably childless woman, or maybe, the empty nester, has to put the damn dog in a baby carriage. And it's so embarrassing. Like, you think that this is not obvious, that this is displaced maternal instinct to the
right.
great, detriment of your poor canine. So that is possible. One does see the safetiest impulse, the non-thinking inability to balance costs and benefits start very early on. We have all these young climate activists long before they have passed any kind of like fertility threshold. But it could be that is just what's in the air at this point, and that this did begin with the displacement of a unfulfilled maternal instinct. It's and whenever you're talking about culture and social problems, it's always difficult to separate cause and effect, and it's an infinite regress. You think you've come up with one cause, and then you ask, well, what's the cause of the cause? And
Right.
I know that you guys in theology have a way of dealing with that. But in any case, yes, that's possible. I'm thinking of South Korea. We know that there are cultures where the birth rate is just completely fallen off a cliff. And so women are not having children there almost at all. And I'm asking myself whether those cultures are quite as feminized and risk averse as the Western cultures are. Japan is another one. And my really untutored instinct is I'm not sure they are. I think that certainly in Japan, a feminist would say it still remains a pretty patriarchal culture, and females are not sufficiently involved in business decisions. So I'm not sure, but I would certainly agree with you that the maternal instinct is something to be celebrated and encouraged, and not viewed as an afterthought to trying to make partner at Covington and Burling by spending 20 hours a day writing discovery requests or fulfilling interrogatories. So sadly, the culture is not providing encouragement to females to doing what is their comparative advantage, which is raising children.
But this is what I guess what I was kind of prefacing it with was we have the capacity as humans to kind of, I don't know, change ideas, to educate ourselves, to try to find new interests and horizons to explore. You would think at the minimum, you could look at an idea and observe if it bears fruit. If it's doing something good, perhaps let's continue to do things like that, which is to me what a conservative is. They simply want to conserve reality. I want to conserve history as it actually is, good or bad, so we can learn from it. I want to conserve the Constitution as it was originally intended. This doesn't mean I'm afraid to progress, but I think true progression happens organically. It happens in a way that we see as a value, and from your, I guess, maybe more secular humanist perspective, human flourishing is kind of the direction we will naturally want to keep going. But, you know, you're kind of the funny petri dish for the proof that a woman is not, I mean, I guess, like I said, even saying these things out of my mouth almost risks the fact that I'm going to seem insensitive or offensive, and I don't mean that way. But you think like a man. You just say, look, I see data. That's what I'm evaluating. Still a woman, love being a woman, but I also can go into my mind, circumvent my heart, so we can get to actual valuable conclusions that actually match reality and will help us in the long run. Well, the very thing that you seem to be observing about women having a difficulty landing on pragmatic, logical absolutes isn't your problem. You're great at it. You're magnificent at it. So does that mean there's some odd thing about you? No, you're a woman that also has a wonderful mind, but you are able to navigate between heart and head, which men can do too. So it's not just a broad brush. You chose a new way to, not a new way to think, a Western way to think that demanded truth and reality over feelings and comfort. So if you can do it, why can't every woman do it?
Well, Brad, please do not put words in my mouth. You said, I've said I love being a woman. I have never said that.
Oh, well, I didn't want to presume that you.
Wait a minute. I do not identify primarily as female. I am that radical that my
really
is not. No, it's not. It's a human being, and it is only occasionally I come up against the fact that I am, sadly, first and foremost a female, but above all during the recent Trump military adventurism, I find myself quite uncomfortable with this. I don't like, and I know that many of your viewers are going to disagree with me, and I'm pleading here a female lack of aggression and risk taking. I'm uncomfortable with a lot of the, whether it's Venezuela or what Trump is doing. I don't want to get into this. I'm just saying, when I've noticed this reaction in me, I think, geez, I am a female after all, because that's a very sort of scaredy cat female response. But as far as why I do not necessarily conform to the stereotype or archetype of female that we are both presenting here, it's just there's always going to be outliers. And
but see, to me, you're just common sense. So I don't see, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm naive. I just feel like anybody, look, there was this terrible, the thing that I most despise about progressivism, leftism, and critical theory is it literally feels like it's intentionally pulling culture backwards, that whatever progress was made towards egalitarianism, towards trying, I mean, people slam America. It's like, look, show me a more ethnically diverse country in human history that has brought in more people from more different older cultures, came together and said, we're going to try to find one sort of continuity that everybody can understand with a particular creed, and we're the only country formed on a creed, that we want you to participate in, bring the best of your culture. We could use it. You got a lot to teach us, but this is America. You're going to speak our language. You're going to love our borders. You're going to defend our nation, our heroes, our people. So to me, that's just kind of basic nationalism. Yeah, why wouldn't I defend my own nation? But what I find is that to the progressive, it's this deconstructing everything. Was it Chesterton that said, if you come out in a field and you see a fence, before you tear it down, maybe you should make sure you know why it was put up in the first place. So I think that this idea that they feel everything of the West is intrinsically evil and bad and wrong is so foolish historically, but it's just so careless, because it leaves nothing but fragments and anarchy, which can't work. But one of the things that I have seen that has been so deleterious to the conversation is this idea that whiteness is what they call it, and I guess it's a dog whistle for European Western thinking, certainly Greek thinking and philosophy and logic and reason and so forth, and then of course Christian thinking and morals and absolutes and human rights. But they come up with this idea of even cultural appropriation. Let's use that as a way. Oh, you have taken something that was of our culture and you're using it. And I'm saying, you call it cultural appropriation, which has a devious underpinning to it. How about what we used to call it was sharing? You had a good idea, I want to use it. Oh, here's my good idea, you want to use it too. So they take virtuous things, they take positive things that were actually helpful to humanity, and make it seem as though there's something nefarious about it. And so suddenly things that did work are poisoned. And so it makes me wonder why logic and reason is now called racism. I don't, and they had to get there by using logic and reason. So it's always self-defeating. I can't think with these people, and thank God I'm a comic so I can mock it on stage and make fun. But it's a very serious issue. If we're living with people who are going to live by their subjective emotions and demand I bow the knee to that, we're screwed. You cannot be a free society like that. Is pure totalitarianism under the auspices of virtue. So I don't even know how one overcomes something like that if that becomes the standard for how we now are going to live as Americans or Westerners.
Well, the cultural appropriation concept is one of the stupidest that I've ever come across, because culture is appropriation. It's a constant give and take. But if we're going to play that game, I highly encourage the West to say, okay, we're taking our marbles back and going home, and say, you can't have our vaccines, you can't have our engineering, you can't have our electricity, our clean water, our longevity, our conquest of maternal and child mortality. So we have been bankrolling and providing the third world the ability to wrench itself barely, and it does not really use our discoveries very well. It's still dependent on first world technology to get its resources out. But in any case, we've been generously letting everybody else culturally appropriate from us. And then they get all hot under the collar if somebody, wears a sombrero at Halloween on a Yale campus. So it's all just ridiculous. Now, I'm enough of a relativist that I have to say, what your characterization of the left, they would say that about us. Let's just be honest. They would say, can't you see the evidence? What's with you people? You don't see what's right in front of your eyes. There's these big structural disparities and inequalities that make it unfair and to expect people to come out the same or exercise their own will. They need government assistance. And as far as why don't these people look at the outcomes and see that their progressive schemes don't work? And that's something that we conservatives will always say about the left-wing mayors and governors of places like Los Angeles or New York or San Francisco, where the homeless encampments just get more and more squalid. And here in New York, every week you've got somebody being pushed, assaulted, maybe pushed into a subway tracks, beat up from behind by these mentally ill, psychotic, drug-addicted vagrants who are left to be on the streets, where it is an absolute certainty that within a week somebody else will get assaulted. Why don't you guys realize and throw the bums out that are giving you these policies? They would say it's not the policy's fault, it's the fact that we're not funding them enough. So there's always an answer. And they would say that they are looking at obvious empirical truths, which is the vast income inequality, which they take, again, we're back in the infinite regress with
Yeah.
presuppositions about what the world should look like and what they think it doesn't. So, it's very difficult as far as, we were moving towards equality for overcoming our traditional prejudices, and now that's all been stripped away. We've got it all backwards. Well, again, they would say, and it does look like the movement of modern Western history, at least, is towards ever greater autonomy. But right now we're in a world of looking for ever more arcane victims. And so there's always going to be some group that you can claim is marginalized and needs help, rather than saying, okay, enough with the endless expansion of civil rights laws and categories. And I would also say, again, to sort of play the devil's advocate here, that conservatives have a problem with authority. In theory, we can quote Burke all we want. We can quote, various Catholic thinkers all we want about the need for tradition, for, making innovations prove themselves before we blindly cast aside traditions. But frankly, conservatives go along with the American narrative, which was to throw aside a very, very long-standing tradition of British monarchy, of a aristocratic system, and the rule of a king, and to actually take up arms to overthrow that. So conservatives are always in a position of, after the fact, validating revolutions, and we sort of close the barn door after the horse is already out. So it's not as if we have 100% consistent position of backing authority. We don't. The American myth, or the American history, the American founding history, depends on an extraordinary challenge to authority. And I don't know many conservatives who are willing to say that universal suffrage was a mistake. That was radical. I think it would be great to go back to poll taxes. Female suffrage was a mistake. Conservatives are happy with things, or at least they're not willing to say that, well, we've made some mistakes and we should have been much more respectful of authoritarian in the past.
Well, that does feel pretty radical, though, in 2026 to say maybe we shouldn't let women vote. I mean, I'm talking to a woman who I would want to be able to vote, you, because you are, I don't know, you're kind of a dichotomy, because you just said you were a relativist, but you're pretty dogmatic when it comes to facts and landing there, which is about as unrelativistic as it gets. But, what I keep saying is, clearly, in a free nation, it's very dangerous to be free, because people can disagree or use that and leverage that freedom to try to destroy it. That's the problem. That's that's the nitroglycerin running through our veins that we have to accept if we're going to be free, is that somebody might abuse it and destroy it. In the Hindu system of class system, there are people that can't escape certain levels of their, karma. And so the worst case scenario is the untouchables. They're the worst case scenario, and they've done it so bad that they're not looked at, they're not viewed, they're not given any credit or any status. And I look at the left as, I call them the unteachables, because it doesn't matter if you give them data. It doesn't matter if you give them pie charts and proof. It doesn't matter, because I think this is true, and maybe I'm being a little kind to my own because obviously I can't broad brush. There's people that are hypocrites no matter where we look. But I feel like, to a conservative, if you're pure about it, if the truth conflicts with what I believe, I change my belief. If to the progressive, to the left, if the truth conflicts with what I believe, I change the truth. See, if you never have to land on paying consequences for your failures, then you're not going to change. You're just going to do the old socialist communist trope. They just didn't do it right. Once they finally do it right, it'll be utopia. So these unteachables, and again, you and I can sit and talk, and we agree on so much, and you help me learn and grow and enlighten me. But the truth is, I could sit here and have a conversation in a mirror and have the same conversation, because we pretty much agree, and it's wonderful, and maybe it's insightful. But I don't know if we're finding progress. I don't know if us elucidating the obvious does anybody any good if you are an unteachable. If it doesn't matter, I'm not changing. I feel good like this. And so that's more important to me than adjusting for the sake of the common good. Well, I don't know what you do with that. You talked about, the Civil War. I mean, that's what the Second Amendment, that was Revolutionary War, was made for. There will come a day, maybe, when your government will decide to take complete control over your agency, and you're going to be able to defend yourself. And we look at that like a legend. We read about the revolution. My friend Eric Metaxas, who, by the way, I just talked to, and he said, say hi to you. I told him how much I love you. And he said, oh, I love her too, say hi. So there's your dopamine hit for the day. Christian conservative men love you. But the truth is, and I know you are, I don't know if repulsed is too heavy of a word, by violence and war. And by the way, who wants war? But it's inevitable, because somebody's going to try to steal somebody's liberties and justice. It's the only way, unfortunately, the world has worked. Men have had to go fight against men. That's just how the game has always played out. But I wonder to myself, Heather, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, wasn't a myth. It was a couple people like you and I sitting at the tavern going, are you really going to grab a musket and shoot the guy down there? Because that's your cousin. And we said, yes. I mean, we did it. So what happens to a nation? Is it even feasible? Is it even possible in this day and age of hyper weapons and being able to look, with heat seeking, this and that, and AI and control of all the narratives, and I can shut your bank account down with cryptocurrency by pushing a button, and suddenly can't buy yourself. Talk about a totalitarian's dream to control somebody. It's here. What would it take? Is it possible that we could end up in America in an actual existential, for real, oh my gosh, are you kidding me, war? Because what we're doing right now is unsustainable.
Well, I have to admit, Brad, I share your despair, even as I'm sort of trying to argue the other side here, but I do share your despair at the seeming inability to breach that divide. And in the back of my mind have little very fleeting thoughts of, oh, to hell with it, let's either succeed or this is war. And I have to say, I read on Audible last summer the audio version of Gone with the Wind, which I think is one of the great novels ever written, and certainly probably the greatest anti-war novel, filled with so much psychological acuity and sheer political wisdom. And it's a very radical and sort of dangerous thing to enter a world from the loser's perspective and dare to understand what the world looked like from the South's perspective. In any case, reading that, it's just a reminder, we do not want to go there. We have forgotten what war is like on one's own soil. It's utter devastation. So I have to quickly pull back from what I sense among some members of the MAGA think tank world of sort of bring it on, let's do this thing. And, it's fun to play around with that idea a little bit, but obviously that's not something we can go into. And as far as like the authoritarian Big Brother panopticon world, absolutely that's a possibility. And yet I have to say, my view when it comes to cameras is the more the better. Like, I wish that every piece of public space in New York had a camera on it so that we could be able to solve crime when the police are unwilling to do so. So all of these technologies, it's very hard to know which are we willing to accept the risk of overuse for their benefits? I don't know. And yeah, the left is unteachables. Yes, it feels that way from our perspective. I would just say again, they would say the same about us.
Well, but they do things like they're so bad at philosophy. Maybe they don't care, but it's like you do a lot of talk about women and sexual differences and why that's important, and it's not a bad thing. But they will take, like, if you were to say acclaim an accomplishment of a man, they somehow equate that with, if I'm saying this man accomplished, then somehow that conflates to, which also means that women are being diminished at the same time. No, a guy did a good thing and everybody gets to benefit from that. That doesn't mean that because the white guy did something that the black guy suffered. That's the game they play so that nothing can ever be glorified. Nothing wonderful can ever be celebrated so that we can be grateful. This was a human accomplishment. Why else would they say the first black astronaut, to this day, the first black guy that ever did this or ever did that? Why do they think that's important? Because apparently accomplishment matters. It inspires a culture. It's something we can learn from. It's something that we can grow from. But as soon as you do it to the white guy, that somehow that came with a cost of having, this is Marxism. He had to pay the price for this guy to get this. He stole it. So, I've never understood that false equivalence that a woman is diminished because a man is lifted up, or a black guy is diminished because a white guy is lifted up, or vice versa. To me, it reminds me of the pride parades, the gay pride parades. And I thought of this before. Norm Macdonald, actually, the late Norm Macdonald, wonderful comic, did a joke about it. It's a little bit more graphic than I would have done, but I had an idea for the joke. But the point that was, and you said it wonderfully, and I've heard you say it a couple of times, being a woman isn't an accomplishment. Being gay is an accomplishment. And it's such a concise, simple, but perfect way to say, yeah, it just is. So I never even understood the idea of a pride parade, because it's like, what are you proud of? What did you do other than you choose to have sex with someone? But I don't understand what that's the driving force that warrants a parade. It doesn't make sense to me. So it just seems like there's this manufactured necessity to give status to people in order for them to be able to engage in culture without feeling diminished. And that means somebody's going to have to suffer. We're going to have an oppressor so that the game works.
Yeah, and you've been very fair in your characterization of this, and saying that somehow what's working here is a zero-sum mentality, that if we celebrate white male, that means somehow, according to the left, that we are denigrating everybody else. And you're saying, no, it's not zero-sum. It's, whatever.
Everybody wins.
Everybody wins. That's definitely a very large part of this, but I would say that there's a more negative interpretation, which is simply that this whole thing is driven by hatred, by self-cancellation, by resentment, the resentment of the unaccomplished, of the people who are dependent, who are parasitic on the strivers and the creators. That is the unique feature of contemporary Western civilization. There's no other civilization on the globe today that is determined to deconstruct its own history and to show that it is responsible for the world's problems. Only the West is engaged in this unique self-flagellation and self-annihilation. And it's also a hatred of traditional values. The gay pride parade, I mean, I guess I get the idea of gay pride when we were just emerging out of a world of legal disabilities and more, stigma against homosexuality and a need to assert an identity. That was a long time ago. Yeah. And we are so far from that. And now I think it simply is that our culture hates bourgeois normalcy. I mean, I remember seeing part of a gay pride march going through Central Park several years ago, and it was all these fresh-faced high school students. And I'm thinking, what exactly is being celebrated here?
That's what I don't know.
And I think it's not so much what's being celebrated, it's what's being marginalized, and that is the idea of two biological parents, male and female,
Right.
raised children. Now the only type of sex that is celebrated is non-procreative sex. It's all every of the LGBTQ pantheon that gets it was expanding for a while, then it kind of contracted and settled down, and it may be expanding again, I can't tell, but I remember, Google used to keep track of how many new weird categories of sexuality there were, but all of them are non-procreative.
Yeah.
And that's part of this bizarre desire of the West to efface itself, and that's what the Great Replacement is all about. It's why the West is insistent on bringing in as many third world culture bearers as possible and effacing its own demographic reality. And you don't see, Africans saying, gee, we want as many white New Zealanders as possible to come in because we're too black. But that's what white people say about themselves. It's, we need diversity as strength. Homogeneity is a flaw on our part, but for nobody else.
Yes. Well, but here's the thing. As a Christian who I view it through that lens, everything you said, I mean, you sound so Christian, and I don't know if you know that or not. And it's a compliment, at least from my point of view, because you know that there are ways that humanity was designed to be, and like procreative. Most people don't think of sex in that way. It's a pleasurable experience that should be indulged in. Well, it is, but its purpose is to make other humans. If it was painful to have sex, we'd still do it because it's the only way we can make people. So the pleasure is a bonus by God, but it's not the purpose of it. It's a nice thing that he lets us, add that to the mix. But, the idea that we hate ourselves, or the West is flagellating, or more importantly, Harry Carey, right, is another kind of thing. As we're getting close, maybe I think we got like 10 minutes left. The other thing that needs to be examined, if we're not just going to talk about the problem, let's see if there is any shot at a solution. But, one of the things that I've noticed is, again, monikers, progressives, leftists can't change people. They can't change hearts. That's a moral, usually religious category. So they change words. You're not handicapped, you're differently abled. Now I've made it all better. It sounds nicer, sounds kinder. And here's the problem, though. They actually give themselves the illusion they've healed them. That's where it gets problematic. If I give them a new name, I've healed you. No, you've done nothing but given yourself some sense of accomplishment, because you don't know how to heal people, because you never make anybody change their behavior. They use this term systemic racism, that it's systemic in our culture. It's not. What's systemic is systemic narcissism. Left celebrates, but more importantly, in my opinion, worships their feelings, their intellect, their desires, and make them rights. They proclaim them to be rights. Their desires become rights. Their perspective becomes sacrosanct, and you must bow the knee. That's systemic narcissism, worship of self. And so that is going to be very difficult to overcome if we are going to return to some sense of, community by which we can agree to disagree agreeably. I don't know if we've gone way beyond that and that we can't retrieve it. But if we are literally 50-50 wanting to despise the other side as opposed to disagree with them, I simply don't know how we can move forward. And I hear them now making, Democrats get in power. What do you see? They're going to go after all these Trump supporters and put them in jail. It's like, what? You're announcing that like that's fair game now? So that is as despotic as it gets. That's why I'm saying, with despair, I'm a Christ follower. I do believe God will fix it someday in the end, one way or the other. But while we're here, while you, who are more, more secular in your perspective, with a desire for a conclusion that's equitable and helpful and healing and real. Well, what is your answer then, outside of a spiritual realm? These people want to make the West go away. Well, somebody's driving that. Somebody has an agenda for what they want to accomplish. If they get that, if they destroy America, somebody's going to take over. Who is it? Who is doing this nefarious formula? What do they want? Is this China? Is this communism? Is this, who is trying to fill the gap if the West and liberty and a constitutional republic is eliminated? Who is left standing?
First of all, I don't think that there's a conspiracy. I don't think that there's a group that has a plan that is working together. I think that ideology is subtle, pervasive, and it evolves over time. So I don't think that we're being manipulated. I think that certain ideas, people are seizing power where they can. I just had an interesting thought. You were mentioning rights and the expansion of rights, but I would say it just occurred to me that in the American project, rights began as a bulwark against government overreach. The rights revolution is furthered by government. Rights are a way to give government more power to oppress the majority and to create new victim groups that have new rights against the majority. So it's a curious flip. And I would say that there is definitely a momentum here and a direction of ever expanding government to replace the family. There's nothing I hate more than government school breakfasts. The idea that there's one mother out there, and I'm even going to concede a single mother, which I don't want to assume that this is some sort of ontological category of single mothers, the way Republicans have even now started speaking about. But even if you're a single mother, I can guarantee you anyone can feed her child for pennies a day for breakfast. But nevertheless, the government not only does school lunches, it does school breakfasts because it wants to displace the traditional family. And it also is based on, these rights are based on, and this is a very big leap that I can't retrace now as I was listening to you, but it is also based on hatred of the private sphere. The expansion of government is based on contempt for, as we've heard from our mayor in New York City here, Zohran Mamdani, a contempt for the private sector and a belief that we should supplant it with government. On his inauguration speech, he said there's no problem too small for government to solve or to interest itself in, and no problem too big for government to solve, which is really ridiculous. And to bring this full circle, I would say that a hatred of free enterprise, of competition, of the glory of empire building, of industrial conquest, that is again a very male activity. And so we have a pro-government feminized worldview that is trying to sideline the values that made Western civilization, which is basically tantamount these days to civilization, possible. And it's the mindset of the losers and the helpless who are resentful of people that have given them their amazing standard of living. And I would say, yes, gratitude for the greatness that preceded us should be a cardinal virtue of all of us. We should all be down on our knees before the scientific method, before the great industrialists, the chemists, the scientists, the artists, the musicians that gave us this civilization, instead of being on a continuous grievance crusade of multiplying phantom victims for the sake of our own puny egos to believe that we're engaged in some sort of heroic crusade. As far as what the solution is, I just say with your till your dying breath, you just have to speak out for the truth and believe that facts are more important. I just, as a concluding note, the thing that we have not talked about here, but I think is another thing that is driving a lot of this, is race. There's a terror on the part of the establishment and even of well-meaning conservatives that racial disparities are not going to go away. And so we're very furiously generating a set of narratives that explain them as a function of systemic racism, of enduring discrimination. So that's another big thing that is going on in Western civilization, particularly in American civilization, but you get it as well in Europe.
Indeed. Well, and of course, racism must be continued because it has cachet. There's money to be made. There's power to be gained. There's status to be grasped. And boy, if anything is true, and it saddens me as a Christ-following man who cares about women and believe that they are equal, but that in many ways men have our instinct is to defend them, protect them. And these leftist women who are abandoning this beautiful part of themselves, this feminine thing, that's a gorgeous, wonderful, crucial, necessary part of the human experience to make everybody move forward in their proper places as to what they're great at. They're going to be the ones that suffer the most once it all goes, if it goes sideways. And there's a despot in place or a theocrat in space, because it won't be Christians. They're not going to be the theocrats. The women in the left will quickly find out what it costs them. So once again, thank you, Heather McDonald, for coming on and being with me. I truly enjoy listening to you, talking to you, growing from your insights, your wisdom. I hope you'll come on again someday and continue to write your books. What's your latest book that we should all be purchasing?
First of all, let me just say, I think that all feminists should say, I don't want to be, if I'm stuck in a burning building, I don't want any men to come in and save me. I want it to be all female. I don't want any male policemen to come and help me, and I don't want any male warriors.
Oh, no, we already had the female captain in California saying if you are burning top of your home and you weigh 250 pounds, maybe you shouldn't have gotten yourself in that position than to worry about a woman. I mean, when they're that blatant about their absurdities, they're the unteachables. But God bless Heather McDonald, even though she doesn't believe in him. But one day she will, because this is surreptitious evangelism. I'm going to get you on our side, young lady. Folks, this is Heather McDonald. Please do me a favor. Follow her. If she's speaking somewhere, go protect her and defend her and just show up for her, because there's plenty of people that can't stand the fact that a woman has that kind of insight and wisdom and intellect and courage, which is not just a masculine trait. Obviously, it's female as well, folks. Remember, if they're saying you're being politically incorrect, always say thank you for the compliment. It means you are a free thinker and you do not self-censor. You are, in fact, someone who cares about the truth. And me, I'm a comedian, Christian, whatever else I am. But I do know on Brad Stine Has Issues, I got one job. Put the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.